The First World War, the so-called Great War, ended in 1918. It left Europe devastated, both physically and emotionally. Millions lay dead, economies were shattered, and the political landscape was forever altered. The old empires like Austria-Hungary and Ottoman Turkey were gone, replaced by a patchwork of new and often unstable nations. The world was weary of war, but the peace that followed was a fragile one. The seeds of future conflict were sown in the ashes of the Great War, waiting for the right conditions to sprout. The victors, particularly France and Great Britain, sought to punish Germany for its role in the war. Germany, in turn, felt humiliated and resentful of the terms imposed upon it. This sense of injustice would have dire consequences in the years to come. In 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was signed in the opulent Palace of Versailles, France. This momentous event marked the official end of World War I, a conflict that had ravaged Europe and left millions dead. This treaty, meant to officially end the war, placed harsh penalties on Germany. The terms were severe and punitive, designed to ensure that Germany could never again pose a threat to the peace and stability of Europe. Germany was forced to accept full blame for the war, a clause known as the War Guilt Clause. This clause was particularly humiliating for the German people, who felt that the blame for the war should be shared among all the major powers involved. It was also required to pay massive reparations to the victorious Allies, crippling its already weakened economy. The financial burden was enormous, leading to hyperinflation and widespread poverty. The German mark became virtually worthless, and the economic hardship was felt by every citizen. Germany lost significant territory, and was forbidden from having a large military. The once proud German army was reduced to a mere shadow of its former self, and the loss of territory meant the loss of valuable resources and industrial areas. The Treaty of Versailles, while intended to prevent future wars, instead bred resentment and instability in Germany. The harsh terms of the treaty created a sense of injustice and betrayal among the German people, who felt that they had been unfairly punished. Many Germans felt betrayed by their leaders and humiliated by the terms of the treaty. The Weimar Republic, the new democratic government of Germany, was seen as weak and ineffective, unable to stand up to the demands of the Allies. This created fertile ground for extremist ideologies like Nazism to take root and flourish. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party capitalized on the widespread discontent, promising to restore Germany's former glory and to overturn the hated Treaty of Versailles. The treaty, intended to bring peace, became a source of deep-seated anger and a rallying cry for those who sought revenge. The seeds of resentment sown by the Treaty of Versailles would eventually grow into the flames of World War II, as Germany sought to reclaim its place in the world. In the aftermath of the First World War, a charismatic and deeply troubled veteran named Adolf Hitler emerged from the chaos. Germany was in a state of turmoil, grappling with the devastating effects of the war. The Treaty of Versailles had imposed harsh penalties on the nation, leading to widespread economic hardship and a sense of national humiliation. Amidst this backdrop of despair and disillusionment, Hitler found fertile ground for his radical ideas. He joined a small, fringe political party known as the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party for short. This party, initially obscure and lacking significant influence, provided Hitler with a platform to voice his extreme views. His early involvement in the party saw him quickly rise through the ranks, thanks to his fervent oratory skills and his ability to connect with the frustrations of the German people. Hitler's powerful speaking ability and the Nazi Party's message of national revival resonated with a German population suffering from economic hardship and political instability. His speeches were filled with promises of a restored Germany, free from the shackles of the Treaty of Versailles. He painted a vision of a strong, unified nation that would reclaim its rightful place in the world. This message struck a chord with many Germans who felt betrayed by their government and the international community. The Nazis exploited this desperation, promising to restore Germany to its former glory and overturn the injustices of the Treaty of Versailles. They used propaganda to spread their message far and wide, tapping into the deep-seated anger and resentment that many Germans felt. The party's promises of economic recovery, national pride, and a return to traditional values appealed to a broad spectrum of society, from the working class to the disillusioned middle class. At the heart of Nazi ideology was a toxic mix of nationalism, anti-Semitism, and racial superiority. They propagated the belief that the Aryan race was superior to all others. and that Germany's problems were the result of a conspiracy by Jews, communists, and other minority groups. This ideology was not just a political stance, but a deeply ingrained belief system that justified their actions and policies. They believed in the supremacy of the Aryan race and blamed Jews, communists, and other minority groups for Germany's problems. This scapegoating provided a convenient explanation for the nation's woes and a target for the population's anger. The Nazis' relentless propaganda campaign dehumanized these groups, making it easier for the public to accept and even support the regime's increasingly brutal policies. This dangerous ideology, fueled by propaganda and fear, would have devastating consequences for Germany and the entire world. The seeds of hatred and division sown by the Nazis would lead to unprecedented levels of violence and destruction. The world would soon witness the horrors of the Holocaust and the widespread devastation of World War II, events that would leave an indelible mark on human history. The 1920s saw a brief period of economic recovery in Europe, but it was followed by the devastating global economic depression of the 1930s. The Wall Street crash of 1929 sent shockwaves across the globe, and Germany was hit particularly hard. Unemployment skyrocketed, businesses collapsed, and millions were plunged into poverty. This economic despair created a climate of fear, uncertainty, and anger, making extremist ideologies like Nazism even more appealing. People were desperate for solutions, and Hitler and the Nazis offered them a scapegoat for their problems: the Jews, communists, and other minorities. They promised to restore Germany's economic might and create a new, powerful, and prosperous nation, a message that resonated with a population desperate for change. A continent in tumult, political instability in Europe. The political landscape of Europe in the interwar years was fragmented and volatile. New democracies, established in the aftermath of the First World War, struggled to survive amidst economic turmoil and social unrest. The old order had been shattered and the new one was proving to be fragile. In many countries, extremist movements, both on the left and the right, gained popularity. These movements exploited people's fears and anxieties, offering simplistic solutions to complex problems. Communist parties, inspired by the Russian Revolution, called for radical social change, while fascist and nationalist groups promised to restore order and national pride. This political instability, coupled with the economic crisis, created a tinderbox waiting for a spark to ignite it. A watchdog without teeth. The League of Nations failure. In the aftermath of the First World War, the League of Nations was formed. It was a time of great hope and ambition as the world sought to recover from the devastation of the war. The League was envisioned as a beacon of peace, a new dawn for international diplomacy. Its purpose was to prevent future wars through collective security and disarmament. The idea was that nations would come together to resolve their differences through dialogue and cooperation, rather than through conflict and bloodshed. The League aimed to create a world where disputes could be settled peacefully. However, the League was plagued from the start by weaknesses. It was an ambitious project, but it was built on shaky foundations. The League's structure and mechanisms were flawed, and it struggled to assert its authority. It lacked its own military force and depended on member states to enforce its decisions. This reliance on the goodwill and cooperation of its members proved to be a significant handicap. Without a dedicated military force, the League had no real power to back up its resolutions. Many powerful countries, like the United States, never joined the League or withdrew their support when it became politically expedient. The absence of the United States in particular was a major blow to the League's credibility and effectiveness. Other nations followed suit, prioritizing their national interests over collective security. The League proved ineffective in addressing the growing aggression of nations like Japan, Italy, and Germany. These countries tested the League's resolve and found it wanting. The League's inability to take decisive action against these aggressors highlighted its limitations. Its failures to act decisively against these aggressors emboldened them and contributed to the slide towards war. The League's inaction sent a message that aggressive behavior would go unpunished, encouraging further acts of aggression. The League of Nations, conceived as a guarantor of peace, became a symbol of the international community's inability to prevent the very conflict it was created to avert. Its legacy is a cautionary tale of how noble intentions can falter without the necessary tools and commitment to enforce them. The failure of the League of Nations serves as a reminder of the complexities and challenges of maintaining global peace and security. A dangerous gamble, appeasement and its consequences. As Hitler and the Nazi Party grew more powerful in Germany, they began to openly defy the Treaty of Versailles. Germany rearmed, annexed Austria, and demanded territory from Czechoslovakia. Instead of confronting Hitler's aggression, Britain and France, led by leaders desperate to avoid another war, adopted a policy of appeasement. They hoped that by giving in to some of Hitler's demands, they could satisfy his ambitions and avoid a larger conflict. This policy, however, proved disastrous. Appeasement only emboldened Hitler, convincing him that the Western powers were weak and unwilling to fight. It also gave him valuable time to rebuild Germany's military and prepare for war. What began as an attempt to preserve peace only served to hasten the coming of war. The fuse is lit from incident to global war. The tensions that had been building for years finally exploded on September 1, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. This act of aggression shattered the fragile peace that had held since the end of the First World War. Britain and France, bound by their treaty obligations to Poland, declared war on Germany 2 days later. World War II had begun. The invasion of Poland was the spark that ignited the tinderbox of European tensions. The world watched in horror as the continent descended once again into the abyss of total war. A confluence of causes, the road to World War II. World War II was not caused by a single event, but rather by a complex interplay of factors that unfolded over decades. The Treaty of Versailles, while intended to prevent future wars, created conditions ripe for resentment and extremism. The global economic depression of the 1930s fueled social and political instability, making extremist ideologies more appealing. The failure of the League of Nations to effectively address aggression, coupled with the policy of appeasement, emboldened Hitler and paved the path for war. World War II was a tragedy of immense proportions, a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the devastating consequences of unchecked aggression. It was a conflict born of the failures of the past, a cautionary tale for generations to come.